Oh, of course, the movie just had to do it. It just had to take a scene that maybe looked okay on paper and then put it into practice. Guess what? Not as good as it was on paper. I don't even know how it would have been good on paper. Anyway, I'm getting off track. The point is, there's a scene in this movie, which is one of those scenes that, oh, it's so awkward and it just takes you right out of the experience. And it's really a shame because honestly, this movie was going really well before that. The Nighthouse. So this movie is a horror movie that stars Rebecca Hall as Beth. And in the movie, her character is dealing with the loss of her husband after he's taken his own life. And it's hard to really talk anymore about what's going on in the movie because as a horror movie in this day and age, it relies very heavily on the mystery that surrounds it. Is it a haunted house movie? Sort of. Is it a straight up ghost movie? Sort of. Is it a psychological thriller movie? Sort of. It's not exactly an original story either. It's one we've seen a dozen of times. After her husband takes his life, Beth is sort of put on this path to figure out what was going on with him. Why did he want to kill himself? And guess what? Shocking! There was more to her husband that meets the eye. And the weird stuff that starts happening that sort of drives the narrative forward happens fairly quickly as Beth starts to realize she may or may not be alone in her house. And why is that happening? That's the mystery that she has to unravel. And if you see in the trailer, you know that there's some pretty cool stuff going on in the sense that the house itself sort of gets reversed and everything's backwards and then there ends up being two of her. Don't get too invested in that as that really came across as just something to put in the trailer. Like, yeah, it has something to do with the plot by the end of the movie, but it's not the main thing happening here. Honestly, the main thing happening here is Rebecca Hall's performance. I don't know why I felt so surprised that it was a good performance, but it was, and it is. Her performance is the single standout thing in this movie. That's not to say that the movie itself is bad and she just happens to be good. No. She really did above and beyond job with this character. I was very happy that they had the character react to the suicide of her husband the way she did. Rebecca Hall's performance has a lot going on. When I say I'm happy the way they went with it is that she's pissed off. She's very angry at the fact that her husband, who showed no signs of depression or sadness or any other sort of issues that might lead someone to take their life. So Beth is very upset with him, and you kind of have to imagine that that's how you would feel if someone that you were so in love with all of a sudden is just gone from your life in such a what seems like selfish way. So in the performance of Beth, Rebecca Hall really sells it and makes you believe what she is feeling. And she's not just pissed throughout the entire movie either. There are layers and levels to this emotional roller coaster that her character is going through, and she does pissed off and extremely emotionally just devastated very well. And that's a good thing because really she's the only character in this movie. Yes, there are other people in the movie. There is a supporting cast. She's got her stereotypical best friend who is worried about her well-being, and she's got this very friendly neighbor that happens to live close to them. It's a fairly remote community. We only get the sense that it's Beth and this neighbor that live on this lake. We do see other houses at one point, but those are the only characters that we ever get to meet. So that makes it very appealing. This little lakeside house that her husband built is where they live. And that's part of the mystery that I guess I can sort of talk about without giving too much away, is Beth eventually goes looking through her husband's things and discovers this little sketchbook where he had drawn the designs for the house. Okay, fair. She keeps flipping through the pages. Then she starts to see some really weird stuff, mazes and wording, trick this, do that. And then she eventually finds a reverse floor plan for their actual house and dismisses it, which is okay for the character, fine, dismiss it, but as the audience you're like, no, that means something, because of course it does. So I do applaud the movie for keeping me guessing. Every time I go into a movie like this, I try to figure out what's going on before the big reveal, and a lot of the times I'm able to do that. Happy to report that The Nighthouse did a great job of keeping me guessing until that big reveal. One thing that's a huge pro to the movie is that I didn't realize until I thought back on it after I got out of the movie, was that it was a really slow burn movie, but oddly enough, in a really interesting way. In the sense of being a slow burn, yes, there's not a lot of stuff that happens. Not action-wisey. There's like one really cool and effective scene that really leans into the jump scare idea, but not in a cheap way, in an effective way that got me and everybody else in the theater. And it actually got my adrenaline pumping and put a huge smile on my face. Got me into that mode that you can get in when you're watching a horror movie where you're just like, okay, just when's the next thing happening? No. So I applaud the movie for those feelings. But there is a lot of sort of revealing information that the movie keeps giving you as Beth is slowly solving the mystery. So like I said, it's a slow burn, which can usually be a negative, but in this case, I thought it worked quite well. It didn't make the movie feel overwhelming. Again, I can't really talk too much about specifics, and that's what makes this so difficult to talk about a movie like this. You don't want to spoil it, because at the end of the day, it was a really effective movie. It was a really good movie up until a certain point. Again, I'm not going to ruin it. You'll know it when it happens, but it's one of those scenes that you just can't believe they actually tried to make it work. And looking back on it, when that scene happens, it's really close to the reveal, and once it is revealed, when you really stop and think about it, you start to ask, well, why did it play out like that if X, Y, Z? It doesn't ruin the movie, but the fact that it jars you so much that I was just sitting there shaking my head going, oh, come on, no way. It's disappointing. Thankfully, very shortly after, the reveal happens, and if you've been paying attention, it's actually a pretty cool payoff. Sort of. Again, at the time when I was watching, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I like that that's the way that they did it. It wasn't something that I saw coming, even though I should have, because I was given all of the information. And it sort of wraps up Beth's character arc. Cool. My problem is that I don't really think she earned that character arc. Like, if she had been set up a little bit differently, then the way it resolves itself would have meant a lot more. The movie also does a very effective job with a lot of its visuals. You know those perspective things that you can see where if you look at it from most angles, it just looks like random stuff, but then when you get down to just one specific angle, it creates an image? Yeah, that was used very effectively in this movie, and I really like the way it was pulled off. It happens a lot, but it's not so heavy-handed that it's overwhelming or boring, and I wouldn't be surprised if this movie does get remembered for being the movie that used that perspective shtick. It has intense moments, it has down moments, it has a fairly decent mystery that you want to see unraveled, and the performance from the lead actress was spot on. Unfortunately, in the end, it does have that one jarring scene that I'm sad to say is probably what I will end up remembering the movie for. Because of that, I'm going to give The Nighthouse a 7 out of 10. Very solid performance from Rebecca Hall. Definitely worth seeing, at least in the theater, because a lot of it is sound-based. So unless you have a wicked home theater system, it's probably better experienced in the theater. But it's going to be a one-off for most people. So how about you guys? Have you seen The Nighthouse yet? If you have, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next one.